Hi, I'm Tom Stanfill, the author of Unreceptive, A Better Way to Sell, Influence, and Lead. And I'm also the CEO of a sales training company called Aslan. And the worst advice I've ever gotten is don't buy Starbucks when the stock first came out.
Why would somebody tell you that, Tom? Are you a coffee drinker?
I love Starbucks. I was such a fan. And that's that. If I would have just bought $1,000, Phil, it would be worth probably about 350,000 right now.
Wow,
I
wow,
know.
wow. So right when it came out, so did you guys have them where you are, or how did you get that
Yeah, no, I
tip to
loved
not
them.
buy?
I love kind of my philosophy of buying stocks is, and my financial guy was like, you need to put X percentage, away in mutual funds, and I'm like, yeah, but I'd like to just like take a little bit of money and invest it in equities, and and then I wanted to buy Home Depot. I wanted to buy several companies, and they all did incredibly well. And he told me not to. And then after, I don't know, maybe fast forward to like 2008, after the market crashed, I started buying stocks, and
Huh.
I will just say it worked out well
Yeah. So did you
without
acquire?
a lot of money. I mean, I bought
Yeah.
Salesforce.com when it was at 22, and I just put like $3,000 in, and that became incredibly valuable to me. It was a lot of money to me. So
Wow.
maybe I should say, because he didn't tell me to buy these other stocks, I started investing in stocks. But anyway, I know the show's not about the stock market.
No, no, no. But that's interesting, right? So
Yeah.
sometimes what other people think is good advice isn't always good for us. And I think
Right.
that's a great lesson, right? I think,
Mhm.
had he been other focused, maybe
Yeah.
he would have listened a little bit more, right? Because I'm going to tell you, congrats on the book, man. This is really
Thank you.
awesome. Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah. That was a labor of love. My first book, I wanted to get it right because I was so passionate about the message that, and again, I'd written a book before. So I wanted to make sure that I didn't get in the way of the message. So I worked really hard to get that book to the market, and I'm getting good feedback. So really excited about talking about it today. And my goal really is just to help other people be better at relationships. I know I focus on sales training and influence and leadership training, but ultimately we're never happier than our relationships, right? We're never happy.
Absolutely.
And what makes relationships work, whether it's business or personal, is communication. And most of us just really aren't very good at communication. Our relationships break down because we don't know how to communicate. At least that's been my experience.
Yeah.
So I feel like this book provides a little bit different way of thinking about communicating and how to be, as you said, other centered, and learn to adjust and change some ways that we talk to other people, and it works.
Yeah, for sure, for sure. Well, you right from the jump, man. I mean, I'm looking at here at
Yeah.
the fly, right at the cover, and you say when you shift the focus from crafting the perfect message, which I will tell you, right, that's what most salespeople do, instead to creating receptivity. You flip the entire art of selling on its head and form relationships that set you and your customers up for lasting success. So tell us about what is receptivity, Tom, and why are so many customers unreceptive?
Great question. So the way that I like to frame it up is, think about every time you walk into a meeting and you want to persuade or influence or communicate, the person on the other side of the table is either open to what you have to say, or open to meeting, um, or they're closed. Right. So that's an important distinction. Like, I want to meet with you. Well, I'm closed. I want to talk to you about XYZ. Well, I'm not open to talking. When I knock on my daughter's room and she was dating Philip, her first real boyfriend, and she was 16, and I say, hey, I want to talk to you about Philip. She was not open. She was what I call emotionally closed. Now, here's why that's important. When someone's emotionally closed, the more you try to persuade them, the more closed they become. So, in other words,
Yeah,
if you sell, you lose. And if you don't sell, you lose. Right. If I don't communicate to my daughter, here's why I think you need to reconsider dating Philip, or I don't communicate to the customer, here's why you need to rethink this vaccine or this solution or product. I'm not helping them because I want to solve their problem. But if I leave, I lose. So what we teach in the book is that you got to shift your focus from communicating your message to creating a fertile soil, to create receptivity. And I think of the soil and the seed. The sort of the message is the seed, and the customer's receptivity is the soil. And until the soil is fertile, you can't plant the seed. The seed doesn't matter. You got to first create a fertile soil. Well, so in when we're communicating, especially in sales, we're one dimensional. We just focus on the message. Well, we need to first create a fertile soil before we deliver the message. So this book is about how do we, throughout the process, create that receptivity. You also ask, why is it getting worse? The one simple answer is information. We are overwhelmed with information, right? So people are just too overwhelmed. They don't want another meeting. They don't want another email. They don't want to talk to a sales rep. And the other reason information hurts us in selling is because the availability of information makes us less valuable. I don't need to talk to you about your product if I just want information. And unfortunately, most sellers are just providing information, right? Because they don't believe they can really solve their problem, or they have insights or expertise to do that. So whether that's true or not, that's the perception.
That's interesting, right? So with nothing but information. I mean, yeah, I'm looking around my office here. I've got some 400 books, and I've got plenty of information. But until I actually read it, or maybe I get an expert like you to help me, right? There's no understanding it. There's no real insight there. And yeah, I agree with you. I mean, I think the confidence that comes with a good salesperson is the confidence in knowing that we have something of value to exchange, not just the product or solution, right?
Yeah, let's just say, so if you're a seller and you really don't know, you don't have any expertise on how to solve the customer's problem, right? In other words, they know just as much about solving the problem as you do, then you're really just you're trying to be available in case they want to place an order, right? I'm available. I'm here. If you need me, I'm here, right? And sometimes, you work for a company or a situation, you got a great product and people come at you, right? And so, you can win that way. But most situations, we have to convince the customer that we know something or we have something that they don't have or know that can solve their problem in a better way. And so that's where, they typically don't believe that about us. They don't believe they think sellers are about to making money. They have commission breath. They just want a commission. And if you're not that rep, in other words, you really do have value to offer, which a lot of reps do, they got to get past that perception. That's why the customer's closed. The customer's emotionally closed. Probably the easiest way to state it. They're closed because they're not rejecting a solution. They're rejecting a salesperson.
Yeah.
Right. They're like, I'll look for they're looking for solutions. They just don't want to talk to a salesperson about it because they're just annoying or they're sticky.
Yeah. Or they're not an expert.
Or they're not an expert.
They never power up, right? They never use the insight that they have. I mean, when I'm training sales, the biggest reminder that I always give my folks is, hey, you're going to sell this 100 times, 1,000 times, 10,000 times. You're going to have 100, 1,000, a million conversations here. You've got insight.
Absolutely.
Like even if you started yesterday and you made 10 calls today, they're buying once and they've probably never bought this before. They don't know how to buy. They don't understand, but they think they have information, and they do, but they don't have any insight. They don't know what it is. And they think the only reason that this person is calling me is because they want to sell me something, not because they want to help me, right?
And the reps that have that insight, right, the sales professionals that really do have knowledge and expertise are reps that are what I call other-centered, because they don't spend their time just focusing on their solution. They spend their time trying to learn what's on the customer's whiteboard. How have other customers solved this problem? What are the best practices? They read what their customers are reading. They get that information from XYZ company and share it with ABC company, and they look at what works and what doesn't work. And so they have tremendous value to share. So for those reps, they just have to get over the receptivity hurdle. Right. They have to, and it's possible to do, but they've got to deal with it first. They can't just boldly walk in and say, I know what to do, and here's what you need to consider, and write the email about their solution and communicate what they know. There's a little bit of a dance they have to do to create the receptivity. I know what's best for my daughter. but I got to create someone who's going to ask me the question, hey, Dad, what do you think I should do? Until someone extends the invitation to you and says, what do you think I should do? It really doesn't matter what you say. Now, I'm not saying they're going to audibly say that, but that's their posture. And so until my wife says, hey, honey, what do you think I should do about fill in the blank? What I say doesn't matter. So we got to create the invitation. We got to create that invitation, extend it in a way to where they say, hey, okay, we'd like to talk to you.
Okay. So we can do that, right? That's possible. You've
Mhm.
got frameworks in the book, right? I went
Yeah.
through, I've got a bunch of stuff highlighted here in the book. So you talk about other-centered, which I think is super important. Obviously, I mean that's the key. But beyond that, let's talk about what does an other-centered salesperson even look like, Tom? How do we identify them, and how do we convince our boss that this is actually the way to be?
Yeah, the beta. Yeah. So the destination we want, and I just want to frame this up, is that other centered sellers ultimately earn a seat at the table. In other words, because what we want is we want to be invited in early in the process to when they're not sure what to do, and they ask us questions. And they're drawing us in. They're like, hey, we're trying to figure this out. We want you to be part of that process. So that's what we're trying to accomplish. And sometimes we talk about that becoming like a trusted partner. But the first thing an other-centered seller does is makes a decision. Other-centered sellers understand that if they just walk into a meeting and they don't stop before the meeting and make a decision about who's the hero of the story, they're going to be the hero of the story. The gravitational pull to self is so strong that if I don't stop before the meeting, like I just did this, I was on a call earlier today with a large corporation, and I had to stop before the meeting, and we have a little meeting and we say, okay, what's this meeting about? Why are we here? Who's the hero of this story? Because if I don't stop and make that decision, it's going to be about me, right? It just naturally default to self. Yeah, I just, I'm going to try to engineer the call a certain way. I'm going to try to hope. I'm going to hear certain things. I'm going to say things. I'm going to try to put pressure on people. So I've got to stop and make that decision. And that's going to drive my behavior. My beliefs and values drive my behavior. It drives my process. It drives what I say. It drives what questions I ask. And motive is ultimately transparent, right? So if my motive is to serve, the customer knows it. If my motive is to sell, the customer knows it. And so they sense what you're doing. And so they become more open because, like in this call, the guy was saying, hey, we really need financial acumen and business acumen training. And I said, time out. I said, I can recommend some companies that do that, but that's not really our strength. We do offer that, but it's not our core. And I'm not sure we're the right solution for you. Well, it's like, I said that because our decision to serve the customer, that's what you would say.
Yeah,
right. And ultimately, I'm going to win more because I'm going to choose people that I can serve, and I'm not going to choose people to work with that I can't serve. They're going to open up more. They're going to listen to me more. I'm going to ask better questions. I'm going to say more relevant things. So that's the first thing they do. The second thing they do is they understand that the customer has three levels of needs, right? They have a stated business need, which the customer tells you. But the other centered reps dig deeper and look for the unstated business need, the unstated need that the customer doesn't even know they have. Maybe it's like they haven't thought through it. And so they don't just go, hey, well, how can I help you? And the customer says, I want this. And you go, great, I'll go get it for you. They're like, wait, I'm not sure you've thought through everything. And so they have the expertise and the drive to dig in there and make sure the customer doesn't miss anything. But the deepest customer need is an emotional need. And so they know how to meet that emotional need so that the customer feels uniquely valued, they feel accepted, they feel appreciated, and they feel chosen. And that's what drives people. And so, the way I always like to talk about it is every time you walk in the room, people's endorphins go off or they don't go off. Like, oh, you're here. And then people get excited, right? And that's their greatest need. Our greatest need is emotional. And so when you meet those emotional needs, and I'm not talking about, it's actually very simple to do, but they're intentional about it. Other centered sellers are intentional about it.
Well, let's drive on that, Tom.
Okay.
I think that's a good point, right? Because the emotional need, you just said it is simple, but I'll tell you, man, in the books I read, that's not the insight that I glean, from
Yeah.
needs. We don't hear about the emotional needs. So break that down a little bit more and tell us how to simply do that.
Well, I went deep in the book. A lot of times when we teach workshops, we don't go this deep. But in the book, I said there's a law that drives all relationships. So you can determine the health of your relationship by how well you meet that emotional need. And the emotional need I talk about is love, acceptance, and worth. And love is regardless of you're talking to somebody with you're just a friend or my wife. It's really about, or my children. It's about being chosen, right? Right. I choose, you are a priority. I'm going to communicate that I'm choosing to have a relationship with you and you're going to feel chosen. I'm going to choose you over work. I'm going to choose you over someone else. My wife wants to know I'm choosing her over everybody else on the planet. And and my behavior, right? So she needs to know, oh, and when I choose her, I listen to her. I know how to buy her a purse. I know how she wears a purse. I know what type of purse she likes. I know what kind of purse she doesn't like. I know that she likes gifts. I know what her love language is. So because I chose her, I focus on her, then I accept her. Right? Like my wife is super cheap. My wife likes to buy lots and lots of toilet paper. My wife likes to buy, there's all these little quirky things. I have them too. My wife wants to know that when I see those little quirky things that I smile and I go, that's my wife. Same thing with my kids. Two of my kids are ADD. They don't want to feel like, oh, well, you're ADD and you drive us crazy and you have a hard time paying attention in school. And that's a problem. They want to know that I smile when they walk in the room. And I love the fact that they're ADD because it makes them creative, right? Because we're all acceptance magnets. We're drawn to acceptance. And then the last thing is we want to be valued. We want to have worth. We want to know that what we do matters and it matters to other people. And so that's a listening thing, right? The listening is about a statement of value. If you're speaking and I value what you say, I listen and I feed it back to you. So those are our greatest needs. And with people that meet those needs, we do anything to be with them. And we share things with them. We don't tell other people. We want to be with them. And that's what makes us attractive. It's not how much money we have or what we look like or how successful we are. It's how well we meet that need, love, acceptance, and worth.
Wow. That's so interesting. So not something that when I read that in the book, I was like thinking about it. I'm like, wow, that just really resonates and makes so much sense, especially the accepted piece. And I think that's the one that often we miss. Like, hey, you're a weirdo.
Yeah.
I don't want to be a weirdo. Like I do. I know I'm a weirdo, but most of us,
right?
We don't.
But you're drawn to people who love your. Yeah, you're unique. You're uniquely created. I love it. Like I'm really drawn to that. But then if other people are like, well, you're kind of weird. You don't dress like I've had people like you kind of dress weird. I'm like, well, I don't want to be without that person. You're drawn to people who like you and are like you.
Yeah.
Right.
Absolutely.
And so if we're in sales, we need to like everybody.
Absolutely.
And by the way, you cannot fake it. I have watched people try to fake it. Like people in our organization who know this stuff and they try to fake it. It's like, it doesn't work. You got to make a decision. You got to look for like, hey, because they're this, it also means they're this. Every positive thing has a corresponding negative. So just look for the corresponding positive if you don't like the negative. But they're God's people. They're God's children, and regardless who they are. And by the way, when you love someone and you accept them, you will see the cool things about them. Yeah. They'll quit acting weird.
Yeah, that's so good.
They'll blossom. They just blossom. I've seen it happen over and over again. They go from being kind of strange because they're by themselves, or maybe because they're mad at the world because people treat them differently, and then you just love them. Unconditional love always wins. I've raised 4 children and I have 14 grandchildren, and I can tell you, unconditional love always wins.
Wow, that's awesome. And that wins at sales too. That's the great part, right? If we love them and then we accept them and we show them that there's value in what they do and what their opinion is. And that's why we lead with agreement, right? I mean, that's one of the things you talk about big in the book is even if they give you some smoke screen or whatever, right? Yeah. Whatever the heck, objection or whatever, you say in the book very clearly, agree with them first. Oh yeah, I can see why you feel that way. That's validated. Interesting. So go a little deeper on that one, Tom, because that one's. I think many salespeople think that the goal is to get them to say yes, when in reality, we need to give them our yes first, right?
Yeah, exactly. You are selling, you have greater influence and are selling more when you validate what they say rather than try to say to deliver your point of view. When you're selling, you have more influence when you're validating their point of view than communicating your point of view. That's an easier way to say that, or fast, more efficient way to say that. Again, because it drives receptivity. And a lot of times, I mean, I see this over and over again in conversations. It's like somebody says something and the other person goes, well, I have a response to that. Right. I've got to respond. I heard you. A lot of times they hear you, but I'm going to tell you why you're wrong, or I'm going to tell you something different, or that reminds me of something I want to say. And what you said, that's that. Yeah, I'm not really that interested because I'm not talking. Right. Or I'm not getting my, we're not focused on my agenda. This is, again, back to resetting our agenda before the meeting. It's like you walk into a dinner party, you walk into a social function, you walk into a business meeting, and we've got an agenda. And it's about us. And so what we need to stop and say, hey, I want to make you feel loved, accepted, and valued. So here's what I'm going to do. You're going to say something, and I'm going to be incredibly interested in it sincerely. And I'm going to feed it back to you. And then I'm going to ask another question that's in line with the same thing you said. And I'll probably use part of what you said in my next question. And I'm going to communicate that I am incredibly interested in everything you have to say. And that person will move towards you and think at the end of that conversation, you're one of the greatest people they've ever met. And you said really nothing except just looked them in the eye, listened to what they said, and you valued everything they said. You didn't overcome it. Now, yeah, there's a time where you need to say, hey, can I tell you something? Yeah, there's a time for that. There's a time where you need to deliver your message. But the soil will be fertile when it's time to deliver the message if you first validated their point of view. So we teach a model called LEAD. Listen, empathetically acknowledge, and drop the rope. So anytime they say something, you listen to what they had to say as if you've never heard it before, because your brain will try to hear what you've heard before and you'll miss it. We talk about clearing your cache, because you've downloaded that information before. So you don't need to download it again. I heard that before, especially if you've been in sales a long time. I know what you mean. I've heard that before. And empathetically acknowledge is about feeding it back to them and demonstrating you understand and care about their point of view until they say exactly. And when they say exactly, and you feel empathy towards what they've shared with you, hey, we're struggling in our business, or we don't know how to do this, or I need to get home more, or whatever the thing is. And you're like, yeah, I feel it because I've taken the trip and I understand your point of view. And then you drop the rope and you say, I'm still not sure if we can help you. Or you mentioned you were working with a competitor and you're talking to other people who might offer something less expensive. That might be what you should do. Let's talk more about that. And so you make them very comfortable telling you the truth. And then they're going to move from sharing just facts to sharing really the real information, the unfiltered truth. And when they start telling you the unfiltered truth, you just gained a competitive advantage.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. The real intellectual honesty that comes with knowing the truth is so powerful and so often overlooked by salespeople, because they're like, no, hold on. If I ask that question, they might say no. And if they
you
say
want
no,
them to say no.
Then I'm kind of no. Yeah, tell me about that, Tom. You want them to say no. Come on.
I'm looking when a customer starts to tell me the wrong answer. Like there's the wrong answer, right? We all know what the wrong answers are. You ask a question, they say the wrong. We don't have a budget. I'm not the decision maker. We're not interested in. We already work with somebody else. I mean, just all the wrong answers. I love the wrong answers because that's my opportunity to demonstrate that I truly care about them as a human being and that I'm not one of those other salespeople, and they can be honest with me. And I say, well, then maybe we're not a fit. Maybe you shouldn't do this. I don't know if you should upgrade the software. You've already got software that works. Like we sell sales training. We'll say, that sounds like what you're doing is working. Why would you invest in sales training with us? And so now they're either going to go, yeah, you're right, we shouldn't. And then I would,
stop selling, walk out. Thanks a lot.
Yeah, I'm not, and this is where it gets a little bit of a dance in our ability to shift and be versatile, because some people might say that or think that and not know really that they have a problem. They have an unconscious problem or unstated problem. So I would still want to keep the conversation going, but the best way to keep the conversation going is to create no pressure zone, eliminate pressure. And that's what we talk about, drop the rope. Instead of tug of war and try to pull them to your position, you drop the rope and say things like, maybe you should say, let's talk a little bit more about that. I'm not sure. You might need this because you may not have a solution for XYZ, but you may not. And then that just continues to allow the conversation to develop.
Interesting. So good. So good, man. I love the drop the rope. I've never heard that said before quite that way, where it basically, you stop pushing, you stop pulling, and you're just like, okay, right? You just accept instead of pushing or pulling. And I think that's super powerful, man. So go ahead. No, go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say that's the easiest skill that we teach or we talk about in the book, is drop the rope. It is just so easy. And it's such a human, just like when I walked in my daughter's room to talk to her about the guy she was dating, and the first thing I said is, sweetie, you can date whoever you want. Yeah. I can't control you. You're 16 years old. Yes, I can. There are certain boundaries that you're going to have, that you have to abide by. But you can do whatever. When you go to school, I'm not trying to. Here's what I want for you. I just want you to be happy, and I don't want you to get hurt. So, in other words, you're the hero of the story, and you're in control of your life. It's your life. It's not my life. I just don't want you to screw up your life. And maybe I'm wrong. Maybe I don't know him. And so that meant, she did immediately 180. And then we started walking together, and we would have lunch regularly, talk about the guy she dated. And she would tell me what was going on. And when the guy would break her heart, I'd send her flowers. I wouldn't say, well, I was right and you were wrong, because it's not about me. That's that tug of war again.
Yeah. Wow. So parenting advice, leadership
advice.
Good stuff, Tom. Mm-hmm. So cool. So let's go a little bit on one of the other topics in the book that I thought was really interesting. The RAS system, right? The reticular activation system.
Yeah.
Typically, right, I see that, I bought a yellow Porsche, and therefore I see 100 yellow Porsches. But tell me how this applies to how you've gone through this with the checklist and all that.
So one of the barriers we talk about in the book is getting a meeting. That's one of the tough ones. Like the door is closed. I got to get in. The subject's not closed. The door is closed. And how do I get in the door? And this is really hard for most sellers right now, is to try to get into a meeting. They're just only having meetings with people they already know. So one of the things that people need to understand when they're trying to get the attention, right, of the decision maker or the customer, is to know how the part of the brain called the RAS, reticular activating system, works. That's the part of the brain that decides what messages get through your subconscious. So you get 10,000 messages a day. That's the arguable amount that people talk about. So your brain filters out most of them and says, don't pay attention. You just don't notice. Like, you ever got home from work, you're driving home from work and you don't even really know how you got home. You didn't notice anything. You just, you saw it, but you didn't see it. You walk through the airport or a mall, and you just don't see things. But then every once in a while you'll see something. Well, that's your RAS at work. So the RAS acts like a filter between your subconscious brain and your conscious brain. And so the RAS is the gate that decides what messages get through. It taps you on the shoulder and says, hey, pay attention to this. And why this is so important is because if we know how, as a seller, we know how the RAS works, we can get the decision maker's attention 100% of the time. Because the RAS will say, you got to pay attention to this. There's two things a RAS pays attention to. Something that you need, that's key. Something you need, or something you don't understand. So something that's unpredictable, something that's out of the norm, that breaks the flow. So what does that tell us about how to get a meeting? We should lead with what's on the decision maker's whiteboard, not with our solution. If I lead with the problem that the person I'm reaching out to has, they will always read the message 100% of the time. And I can make that point by giving you this example. If I hold up a picture of you, you will look at it 100% of the time. If I show you a picture of you and there's three other people, where do you go? You go right to you.
Where am I?
It's a bad picture. That's a good picture. And then you may not even notice the other people. If I show you a picture of me, which is how we prospect, here's a picture of me. Here's my solution. Now, if they're looking for your solution and that's on their whiteboard, that works. The problem is 2% of the people are probably looking for your solution. or maybe trust you enough to talk to you. But the best way to get their attention is to lead with a problem on their whiteboard. Lead with something they're doing, what they care about. And then the next thing you want to do is communicate a disruptive truth about a better way to solve that problem. And so you capture their attention by leading with them. You elevate your role in their life or their perception of you by communicating a disruptive truth. And that separates you from, gets their attention and separates you from almost all of the other sellers. And so that's what the RAS, that's why we talk about the RAS, because it's a science, it's a neuroscience that tells us how it all works.
Yeah, for sure. So that quote that you just said in the book just blew me away, man. That if I show you a picture of you, you will look at it 100% of the time. I have that like highlighted. Like I have to remember that, because that's such an important point. Because as sellers, we so much. Hey, here's a picture of me. Aren't I attractive? Aren't I good looking? Come on, Tom. Aren't I cool?
Yeah.
Like, look at me, man. And you're like, no, what? I don't see me. I mean, unless that's a picture of both of us, you're not looking at that picture.
Right. Yeah. And if you're at a party and you just want to be, hey, I want people to focus on me and you want to grab the attention, fine. But you're not going to make a lot of money doing that. If you want to make money and you want to get a meeting, you need to show people pictures of themselves. And you know, and then the next question becomes, well, how do I know that? See, that's where the other-centered thing comes in. See, other-centered people know what was on the people they serve's whiteboard. There's only probably 4 or 5 things that on, if you serve a VP of manufacturing or director of marketing or head of labs, there's 4 or 5 things on their whiteboard that's similar to all the other directors of labs or VPs of manufacturing. They're all dealing with the same. I serve VPs of sales and head of learning, and they all kind of struggle with the same thing. And so, and then you also, if it's a super strategic account, you may want to spend time talking to people who know them and doing your research. But at least if you guess wrong, at least you have a chance of getting their attention, or you can change it up. But that's I mean, it works. That's a great thing about it. And the thing is, we've tested it, and I think I share this in the book. We've tested it, and it gets such a higher response rate.
Yeah, I love the science behind it. That was one of the things that pleasantly surprised me the most about the book, is because
Oh, really?
you know, a lot of times it's anecdotes, right? It's okay. So this worked for Sally, and you know, as I work on my next book, right? I'm not a science guy. I'll be the first to tell you that, but I always appreciate when the science comes out,
right?
And I'm like, oh yeah, right. Like that makes sense, right? Neuroscience is super powerful. I totally get that, right? I'm just, you know, I don't. You know, I don't always, I guess, focus on that as much as I could. So I really value that in the book, that you come back. Every piece is, you know, is backed by science, which I think is super great, Tom. So good work on that.
Well, when you're not that great of a writer, Phil, you got to have science.
Yeah, that's what it is.
Talk to that guy. He's really smart. Talk to that woman. She's really smart. This is what they said.
Yeah, there you go. That's so funny. Yeah, always being other-centered. I love it, man. Love it, love it, love it. So okay, so let's bring this home with a math equation here. 1033. 1033. You share this in the book, and I have to tell you, it is probably the cleanest, most interesting way that I've seen a cold call work. So talk to me about 1033, Tom.
1033. Yeah, we've tested this for many, many years, and it just works incredibly well in the most difficult situations. So 1033 is it's a framework for introducing yourself to a cold prospect. It's 10 seconds to get 30 seconds to get 3 minutes. So the 10 seconds is what you say while the other person is thinking about who you are. So they have all these. So when you call somebody to interrupt their day and they're not expecting the call, you might have even seen them at a trade show, right? They just walk up the booth, or you bump into them in the office while you're wandering around, and they're not. You walk in and you start talking, or you call them and you start talking. They're thinking about who are you? Do you work with so and so? And they're not listening to you. So the first 10 seconds is to ask some question that doesn't end the call or end the relationship. that just gets their attention. Hey, did you know we were working with so and so, or did you know that so and so recommended that I talk to you, or are you here? Are you at the trade show for this reason? Are you from this local area? Ask a question that gets them to talk, because that will quiet the voices in the head. And that's not when you want to deliver the most important part of your message, which is the 30. The 30 seconds is when you deliver the reason you want to talk to them. And that's where I talk about your position. And your position, again, needs to lead with the problem that they have. And then you communicate some disruptive truth about how you solve that problem, or know something about how to solve that problem better than they do. And then lastly, you communicate what's proprietary about what you offer. And then you ask permission for a 3-minute discovery meeting. That's the easiest commitment you can get from a cold prospect, is a 3-minute discovery meeting. I just want to talk to you for 3 minutes to determine if it makes sense for us to spend more time in a more formal meeting, or spend time going through our solution, or learning more about your business, etc. So 3 minutes is the easiest commitment you can get. And people are going to say yes to that. So 10 seconds to get to quiet the voices in the head, 30 seconds to communicate why you're calling, your other centered reason for the call, and to get permission for just 3 minutes to ask them a couple of questions to determine if the next step makes sense. And we've tested that with sellers calling people at home selling life insurance. And they had 22 times more engagement rates than they were before using the 1033.
Wow.
Isn't that crazy?
Life insurance, man, the toughest thing probably on the planet. Hey, you want to talk about dying? Oh yeah, and how about
I want to talk about dying? And they were doing the typical thing. Hey, this is what I do. I'd love to come by. I'd love to set up a meeting, blah, blah, blah. And then you're going to say no. Then I'll try to overcome your objection. And that's going to be great, because I don't even know anything about you. So how am I going to overcome your objection? And the objection's false anyway. And you can't overcome a false objection. So just say, hey, I don't know if you need life insurance. You probably don't. But we help people do blah, 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 blah. Can we spend a couple of minutes over the phone just to see if it makes sense for us to set up a meeting? The number of people that said that was it was 2,200 times more than what they were doing before. Now, sometimes it didn't lead to an appointment, because people are like, yeah, we're now that we talked, I don't think it's a need, and great, but they got people to at least have a conversation.
Wow.
And and also you feel so much better. Like and that part of it is, as a seller, we hate these stages of the process, because we feel like we're groveling. Please talk to me. It's like, hey, listen, I don't know if you need to talk to me. I'm an orthopedic surgeon. I fix knees. I don't know if you have a knee. You're here. Let's talk about it. You got a problem with your hip, your knees, and you may or may not know. You may think it's back problem, but it could be something else. And you want to talk for a couple minutes and see if it makes sense to set up an appointment. It's just kind of that simple.
Yeah. Super simple. All great stuff. Love the 1033. Love the understanding what's on your customer's whiteboard. Love the idea to create receptivity. And most importantly, the decision to be other-centered is super duper powerful. That's my favorite part in the book, Tom. It's fantastic, man. So how do we get started on the journey? Obviously, we should get a copy of the book. But if we want to get started on this journey of being other-centered and fertilizing the soil a little better, how do we do that?
I think what I would say is start with learning the customer's whiteboard. Like, be a student of your decision maker, like the people you serve, right? So if you take let's say you serve 3 different types of decision makers, set aside time in every meeting to learn something new about them that may not be related at all to what you normally talk about or what you offer. Just say, hey, one thing I don't know about it, we've worked together for XYZ years, or we just met. Let's just set aside that we sell software, we sell this. What's the biggest thing that you're struggling with this year? What trade shows do you go to? What do you find is the biggest challenge? What's the biggest change in your industry? Who do you listen to? Just become a student of them. And once you do that, you're going to start. That's, I think, the best path to driving receptivity.
I like that. I think that's great. I think the more we learn about the people that we serve, the better we can serve them. It's pretty obvious to do, right? We don't have to lead them right to our solution. Sometimes we can't even solve their problem. But if we can help
Right.
them, if we can serve them, they might come back later in another time, right?
I'll say one other thing too. I want to add to that. It's a lot easier to apply because you don't have to do anything. You just have to believe something. Is believe that you're going to be more effective and more fulfilled when you choose to serve other people. That's just true. That's the great thing about being the person you really want to be and being in sales. You actually sell more. Like it's not about, hey, serve the customer, but make less money. It's about serve the customer and make more money. Have longer relationships, more fulfilling relationships, loyal customers who spend more time with you, spend more money, buy more, listen more. It's more fun, and and you feel good about what you do. So it's just not normal. It's not instinctual. It's very counterintuitive.
Yeah, it is, man. It is. So, folks, if you're looking for a different way to sell, and I would tell you, if things haven't been going great for you, you might want to think about it differently, right? Be a little more receptive to something else, right? The book is Unreceptive. This is Tom Stanfill here that shared a lot of great stuff with us today. Go to unreceptivebook.com. Check it out. Get a copy for yourself and devour it. I marked mine completely up. I'm super, super excited to go back and listen to this and to learn more about how to make the ground even more fertile for those that I want to sell to. So thank you, Tom. I really appreciate it, man.
Thank you so much, Phil. I love being on your show. Really did.
Thank
I
you.
mean that.
Thank you. I'm so glad that you were here.